We had 16 successful captain picks in the second half of last season and only 3 blanks. It's not like we relied on Haaland either, we only captained him 6 times. It's practically impossible to pick 38 successful captains every season. However, I will improve your captaincy record this season. Just make sure you subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. Let's carry on the record into this season. The 3 options are Salah against Ipswich away, Isak against Southampton at home, and Saka against Wolves at home. Salah's the only player on the shortlist to not have the home advantage. However, if you look at last season's non-penalty stats per 90 minutes, he was head and shoulders above the other 2 players. Him and Saka benefit in the calculations, where they get an extra point for every goal scored and an extra point for every XG registered. So Isak being a forward does get punished a little bit in the calculations. He also doesn't have the potential for a clean sheet point like the other 2 players. However, he is on penalty duties in the absence of Wilson, but he doesn't gain anything because Salah and Saka are as well. He is at a slight disadvantage when it comes to free kicks and corners. Saka's the main man on indirect free kicks and corners. Now Salah's not much to shout about. He takes a direct free kick every now and then, but that is quite rare. Isak doesn't take any. He more than compensates for it with the anytime goal scorer odds. He's 10% ahead of Salah and 14% ahead of Saka. Whilst his anytime assist odds do let him down a little bit, I do prefer the odds to be weighted more towards goals, and he's got the highest anytime return odds, 5% ahead of the other 2 players. I know the other 2 players get an additional point for every goal scored, but he doesn't quite make up the ground, and there's a higher chance of success there for Isak. It's worth noting that these odds are based on the assumption that each player plays 90 minutes. We will take a look at the expected minutes later in the video, but for now, the expected minutes are included in the points projections, along with other useful metrics, and it's Isak who tops the charts again, but only just on FPL review by 0.1 point. It's Salah who's the best on Fantasy Football Fix by 0.3 points. If you average out the points projections, there's nothing in it between Salah and Isak. Salah's on 6.95 and Isak's on 6.85. Saka doesn't quite compete. By comparing the opposition's defence, we can see that all 3 opponents, Ipswich, Southampton and Wolves, have a 94% chance of conceding this game week. As for the underlying stats, I've applied a 1.17 multiplier to the Championship defensive numbers. That's because data analysis suggests that the Premier League is roughly 17% more difficult than the Championship. This just gives us a rough idea, but I would take it with a pinch of salt. What we can do is compare the Championship numbers to each other and see that Southampton's defence shipped a few more goals than Ipswich last season, but there's not much between them. One thing that favours Ipswich out of all the opponents is that they've got the home advantage against Liverpool. Whilst the Wolves' defence wasn't the best last season, I still think they'll concede slightly less goals than Ipswich and Southampton this season. I think it's difficult to predict right now who's going to have the leakier defence out of the promoted sides, but what I will say is that I think Isak is the easiest fixture because he's got the home advantage. Before we conclude, we're going to carry out a quick risk assessment. All 3 players on the shortlist have had an adequate amount of resting days. However, Saka hasn't played many minutes in pre-season. He's only featured for 121 minutes in pre-season, which is just over 1 fixture. Salah and Isak have played more than 300 minutes each. Based on what I've seen from Saka, he's got the least promising underlying stats, his weighted odds are the worst, he's got the lowest points projections on both data models, and he's got the lowest expected minutes, so I can comfortably rule him out as the best captain this game week. Is between the other 2. There's not much to split them with them both having a high ceiling against promoted sides. I think home advantage is important. The player I'm going to pick benefits from that, along with several other factors that are also important. I think the best captain for game week 1 is Isak. If you want to see my FPL team ahead of the new season, click the link in the top right corner to watch my team selection video.